2017, and this meeting is being broadcast by Milford TV. So if anyone would like to obtain a copy, please reach out to a member of the administration or school committee. We do have some special guests tonight. Is Sarah back there someplace? Hi, Sarah. Do you want to just introduce them and we'll kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So tonight we have students here who auditioned and have made the Central District Ensemble. And I have a couple of students from Chamber Choir who will sing Can't Help Falling in Love. You can clap, that's fine.
Wise men say only fools rush in, for I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes to me. So take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you, for I can't help falling in love with you.
So we're going to switch up the agenda a little bit here tonight. While we have some of the students here, we did want to provide some recognition to the students that were named to All-State. So I don't know if they're all here, Sarah, or just a few of them, but
yeah, we're missing a couple, but mostly all here.
okay. So the following students were named to All-State: Justice Bowman, Jacob Dias, Emily Fry, Allie Kelly, Gianni Pano. And I apologize if I don't pronounce this the right way. Eilat Tabak, and Zoe Tillman. So congratulations to all of them for making the senior district ensemble. And do you want to say a few words, or are you?
Sure.
I'll put you on the spot.
So students audition in November, and then.
So Sarah, can you jump up to the microphone?
Oh, great. Right here?
Yeah,
Perfect.
Either one.
Yeah.
Either one.
We can hear you without the microphone. The folks on television.
Oh, okay. So students audition in November, and there's a list of pieces that they have to audition with. And then they can they're accepted to central districts, and from there get an all-state rec. So we had a number of students accepted into central districts, and then a number of students who also received all-state recs. So these students will go to Wachusett at the end of January, and Wednesday and Friday have rehearsal, and then put the concert on Saturday. So it's a very short rehearsal time. It's very difficult music with a guest conductor, with students from schools all through the Central District. And then they'll put on a concert at Mechanics Hall in Worcester that Saturday. So they've worked really hard. It's a really prestigious opportunity for our kids, and we're really excited for them. So just congratulations. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Nice work. Thank you. So next we have Brianna Braza and Kyra Alves. Would you like to come up? Representing the Portuguese community. I like it. You can go ahead. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So throughout the past couple of weeks, many things have happened in our school. Winter sports have begun and they're off to a pretty good start. The boys varsity basketball team earned their first ever win against Taunton, which was really exciting. And our music program put on an outstanding winter concert for a great crowd on Tuesday night. Our students now have the chance to apply for a seat in 2 different early college courses starting in January also.
Our Toys for Tots drive has now ended. In total, we were able to raise hundreds of toys with help from the community. Also in our school system, members of the guidance and counseling departments were able to give out 51 Target gift cards to underprivileged high school students who otherwise wouldn't get the experience during the holidays. That's all we have.
Awesome. Great. Any questions for Brianna or Kyra? Scott?
Thank you. So I have to ask. So, thank you, ladies, for coming. I know it's can always be a little nerve-wracking speaking in public, especially on TV and with an intimidating group. Everyone's all dressed up tonight. I like it. But thank you guys thank you, ladies, for coming and speaking. So, both seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So, college applications are in. Have you guys started hearing back from schools yet?
Pretty soon, but not yet.
Okay. Do you have a sense? So one of the things I love asking when we have seniors that come in front of us is, do you know where you'd like to go next year? What are the choices?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I applied to 9 because I couldn't really make my mind up. I've heard back from 4, so I got into Southern New Hampshire, Johnson & Wales, the University of New Haven, and Central Connecticut State.
Wow. Great.
Good job,
It's a
Grace.
good list.
I applied to 7, but haven't heard back yet from any. But soon, so I'm excited.
Okay. That should be any day.
Yeah, I hope so. And I'm hoping to either go to West Virginia University or the University of Delaware.
Excellent. Do you guys know what you're going to be studying or what you'd like to study?
I'd like to study sports management.
Okay.
And I'm going to study hospitality and tourism management with a center in the events.
Excellent. Well, good luck to both of you and congratulations. And
Thank you.
again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
everything that you guys did. So
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
Happy
Have a good
holidays.
night. Happy holidays.
Have a good night.
You too.
Happy holidays.
All right. So our next order of business is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th, 2017, regular meeting and executive session? Motion from Scott, seconded by John. All those in favor? I'm going to abstain. I was absent at the last meeting, so 5 in favor. I'm sorry, 6 and 1 abstention. Next order of business is the announcements, correspondence, and distributions. Do we have any announcements or correspondence? Kevin, did you have anything today?
I don't have anything for
No? Okay. And then invitation to speak. Do we have anyone here with invitation to speak? Ms. Ortiz? Hi.
Good evening.
Thanks for coming in. And I know I shared the policy with you, so you're familiar with the rules. So you have about 5 minutes, and after your presentation, the committee will listen to what you have to say, but we won't necessarily respond. And then just as a reminder, comments concerning any of the staff are considered to be a violation of the open meeting law, and then discussing any individual student behaviors could violate the privacy laws as well. Thank you.
All right, so my name's Jessica Ortiz, and I wanted to start off by telling you about myself and my family real quick. I've been a resident of Milford for over 12 years now. I'm a mom of 5, a single mom of 5. My 2 oldest children graduated Milford High already, and I have 3 others in Milford schools. I'm hugely involved in a lot of communities around here. I volunteer at a zoo from April to October. And I also volunteer with some great organizations up in Framingham, as well as sometime volunteering for Salvation Army. I've also served on the school council for Brookside because I wanted to get to know what was going on in the school. So I'm a person that advocates a lot for my kids, and I also look into policies and try to understand what's going on before I go into any matter. So the reason I'm in front of the committee tonight is because one of my kids was being bullied and harassed in the Milford School District in November, and I felt like they did not, the Milford School District and I had a lot of conversation electronically and in person. I had to have a hearing my daughter had to have a hearing as a part of these incidences that had to do with what I call bullying and harassment, but the school district does not. Basically, my daughter had about 4 incidences within 2 days with a classmate. So I'm not going to say those things just because I don't want to break any policies or rules here. But she felt intimidated and violated at certain points. She felt verbally attacked at other points. And there was the school district, inside the school district, there was people there that seen these things. So we had our chance to have our hearing. She had a chance to be heard at the school district, and as a result, she was suspended for 1 day for using profanity when some of these incidences were happening. So I had filled out a bullying and harassment form that day at the hearing for the school district to investigate my claims and her claims, because that's what I felt like it was. And I didn't feel like they were keeping her safe with their decisions, with the outcomes of their investigations. So I just wanted to let the school district know, and at that time I wanted to let the school district know my feelings, and I did all the right steps that I was supposed to do, and I felt like she still wasn't being protected enough, because this classmate, it's not only the classmate, it happened prior years with the classmate's family as well, right outside of other schools. So basically I felt I had to get more help, and I went to the Milford District Court to see if we could get a harassment order, just so that she was safe. She does walk home. I do live very close to the high school, and all the schools basically are right in that radius. So I went to the district court, and we had a hearing with the other party in front of a judge, and it was very tough for both of the parties, my daughter and the other person. But they went through it, and an arbitration order was ordered, not a harassment order, basically because the judge is a very caring person, and it's right. I mean, I don't want anybody getting arrested. I had no idea that had to do with the harassment order. If you violate something in the harassment order, you get arrested, and then they investigate, and then you have court hearings and proceedings. So I'm glad that the judge came up with an agreement. I do have it here if anybody needed a copy of it, but it does have names in it, so I don't know if I could share that or not. But basically, it's the same thing as a no harassment order. You get to stay away from each other, no doing this or that, just making you feel safer. And because of this from the district court, I feel like it validated my feelings towards the school district, that this could have been done within the school district, and I wouldn't have had to go out to the outside of the school district to get help for her, like help enough that I really feel that she's safe, because there cannot be cameras in the bathrooms or certain places within the school district. So I feel like things have to be very put in order. So I feel like the other person wasn't, she didn't get suspended as a part of the bullying and harassment. There's a lot of things I disagree with, but the most important thing is that I put this on, I found out that I can put a complaint into the DESE, which I probably will be doing, and I talked to someone here about that, because I have to. That's part of the process there. If you file a DESE, you have to make sure the school district gets the same copies that you're sending them. So I'm just following all of my all the ways you're supposed to go. You know, I'm not trying to cause trouble for the school district. I just want to make sure that the school committee knows it's not just me, by the way. I put this out there. I didn't say what happened. I just said, you know, on a community forum on Facebook that this is where you can go to the DESE website on massgov.com if you need to file a complaint if this has happened to anybody else's family, because I didn't know what to do until somebody told me. So as a part of that, there was probably 30 people as well that had very similar stories or even worse of stuff happening in the school district now or even years ago, and it still bothers them. So that's when I want to make sure that the policies, I read through the policy of bullying, and it's very difficult for me to read. It's very difficult. I'm an advocate, you know that. So a lot of parents don't understand the process, and they don't know how to stick up for their children, or if they feel like something's not right. A lot of people have left the school district, which I refuse to do. This is our home, and this is where we want to go. I had 2 kids graduate here already. I want her to feel safe, and I want her to graduate from here. So I want the school committee just to look at maybe the policies and how things are dealt with, because it over and over again on that post that I wrote, the one common denominator was that the bully doesn't get suspended, but the other person has to leave. My daughter was an athlete before she came to the high school. Every basketball season is a problem because of the other party also isn't an athlete. And they're both very good athletes. I was so looking forward to her playing basketball for Milford High. But she refuses to because she doesn't feel comfortable, and that's a daily thing, like daily or every other day for practices. So I don't know if I don't want any resentment or retaliation as a part of any of the things my family had to go through, but I would like to know that the school committee would make the school district look at these policies more. And I was told by the school district now that there may be a bigger forum for the community to speak at in a later month, and I'm happy about that. I just hope things change, because my daughter is depressed, she's on medication, and this is due for very good reasons. And when you get bullied plus that, you don't know any of these kids' outside lives. You don't know how sensitive or fragile they are. So if it's happening to one and all these other people, we have to be careful and make sure that everything's happening the way it should be within the school district. So that was what I wanted to say. And also, I was told by the school district that the Metro West Health or something like that gives you guys data, and the number of incidences of being bullied has come down. But even if there's one student like mine, it's just not enough, because we want to make sure they're safe and that they feel okay to come to school, because she's doing great academically for the first year in a long time. She wants to be here. I don't know what else to say, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew what happened in my case and that it's not just my case.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming in and sharing your story.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, Mr. Ortiz.
Good night. Okay. Anyone else here for invitation to speak? No. All right, so next order of business is the Milford Public Schools policy review. So we have a first reading of the school facilities fee schedule. Who's going to be running point on that?
Sure. So if you want, so the first thing is just with regards to, so this is KF. So this is just reviewing. We just made some changes here. There were a couple of things just, and you can see it's all been redlined in here. The first big change was just, initially we had put in a piece for all non-for-profit organizations being exempt from us collecting fees on, and it's not. I just want to make sure we understand that for those that are viewing at home, and as well as for this committee, the intent is not to change it so that we can collect fees and start to, I would for lack of a better term, target, non-for-profit groups for fees. It's really just, we didn't want to limit it. We wanted to really, the intent of this and the changes with some of these policies that you're going to see as we go through these with the facilities and the fee schedule was to, a lot of the control and decision-making was actually put on the school committee. And not that we're looking to abdicate our responsibility on this. It was really more of a, there are in-the-moment decisions and day-to-day decisions and sometimes timelines that go along with that, that need to be made by the school administrative body, Kevin and his team, that happen more frequently than waiting for a school committee to get it on an agenda and waiting every 2 weeks, and during the summertime even less, if there was something that came up. So in that spirit, you can see as we went through here, so the first line was really just an adjustment of that. Then it was an exemption from rental fees. Really just what we changed, what we altered the language to is student participation groups and organizations approved by the school department for use in continuing basis, weekly, monthly meetings, will be charged a fee of $30. That's consistent, that didn't change. If you look there, what we did remove there is it's saying school department may require minimum levels of appropriate continuing school groups, school organizations. It was very, very limiting. It was very, very specific language. We removed some of that to make it a little bit more general. And again, to return some of the authority and decision-making authority to the central office. If you go on to page 2, same thing, special arrangements. Again, this is putting it back into the hands of the district. Number 8, you can see payment of all fees, checks made payable to Milford School Committee. We changed that to the town of Milford. Again, just keeping it consistent with all other fees that are and payments that are made. You'll see as we move on to page 3, very similar, moving from school committee to school department. There was actually no, previously there was an application that was submitted, but there was actually no approval process that was gone through. It was if someone wanted to use a facility within the schools, they would submit an application. It would be reviewed just for completeness, and then they would be issued a permit. What we've done is we put through a review process. We've had some instances come up recently where we've had groups that have applied, we've had a group that's applied to use one of our schools on an ongoing basis, and the feedback that we received from central office is that there really wasn't a mechanism for either approval or denial or review of this. And it was really just they submitted an application. It was a complete application, and as a result, we then, in fact, they were issued a permit. So this puts some approval process and some oversight into that. That's really what this is doing. In addition to, as an example with the non-for-profit, it does happen to be a non-for-profit group. The estimated cost, especially as we get through the winter where it's many, many hours over the course of a weekend, when normally the heat would either be at a reduced temperature or off, depending if it's warm enough outside. So there's an expense that's going to be incurred by the schools with no ability to recoup those costs. And it's very, very, and it's obviously it's an expense piece. So we really put that approval and that authority on there. Again, going to page 3, page 2 of 3, again, just changing from school committee to school department. We also removed middle school east off of here. We're obviously no longer leasing or providing rental space in that building, as we no longer are in possession of it. And again, just further on, moving from school committee to school department. Going on to, and that's really the end for that particular policy. Any questions, concerns? All fee schedules, just for the benefit of anybody watching at home as well. Many, many years ago, when the facility use, specifically the high school facility, was put in place, there was an ongoing discussion, a fairly lengthy one, around what the cost was for local organizations. We kept that fee at the same $25 per hour that it has been since the high school, since the newly renovated high school complex has been put in place, and we did not make any changes to that. Questions or concerns?
So just have one question, and
Sure.
This might be for Kathy. So on the facility, the first policy, KF1, it talks about the requirement for a school custodian, and then there are fees associated with that, the personnel service fees.
Yes.
So if it's a group that wants to rent the facility, let's say right after school for something, there's a custodian on duty, we're not charging them for that fee, right?
No, it's absorbed.
That's absorbed, okay.
Yes.
So it's only if it's over the weekend, for example, when the custodians normally aren't on duty, that we would then assess that fee?
That's
Or
correct.
evenings or something,
That's correct.
okay. So schools that have overnight staff, if there's a rental, then there's no reason to charge that fee, but some of the schools that don't have that overnight staff, if that's being rented, then there is a fee,
We don't
right?
generally have the fee. We try to push a group where there is nighttime oversight.
Okay,
I can't think of a time during the school year that there's been a rental and a custodial fee applied during the week.
okay. And are there situations that come up where, let's say, they're renting, there's multiple events happening at the high school,
Yes.
so you got multiple groups that are coming in, are they sharing in the cost of the custodian, or are they all being charged the full cost of the custodian?
No, they would share the cost. And sometimes, in some cases, if the building is maximized with large groups that might be renting the facility, then there might be a double custodian cost. But we try again to take a look at the permit and see how we can mitigate the cost for the group coming in.
Okay.
But if there is a large amount of two groups renting, we would charge each group the fee for the
Okay,
custodian.
okay. So if there's a swim meet, for example, and a wrestling event or practice,
They would
you're probably gonna
absorb
need a
that.
lot of custodians there because of the number of people.
I'm picturing something where we have one particular rental where they literally use almost the entire building. And then maybe the diving team might have a competition. Then the diving team would not be charged. The rental community would be charged because they're using so much more of the facility.
Okay,
And then the oversight would just be there for the diving team.
okay. Yeah, perfect. All right, so that was the first reading, right?
It was a
Okay.
first reading, yep. So if there's any questions on that one. And again, the intent behind this is, as an example, in order to, for some of the pieces that were being changed, in order to appeal to get a change in fee schedule for any group, they actually would have had to come to the school committee for that.
Mhm.
This allows the school administration to really manage that
Yeah.
on an ongoing basis. And again, I want to be very clear. I don't want us to be coy about this. There's a very specific group that's renting out one of our schools that's currently running services on a Sunday all day long. We're heading into winter right now, and because it's considered a non-for-profit group, there's no ability to recruit. We're going to be paying heating costs for a building. In addition to, because there was no approval process, it was just an application. Having done some further research and everything else, some of their ideals don't exactly match up with what we would consider to be something that we would support or may necessarily feel comfortable with renting one of our facilities. So we want to be able to give that oversight and authority to school administration to be able to approve and or at least review all applications before approval. So it is a first reading, but unless there are any changes, Mr. Chairman, or recommended changes, then we don't necessarily have to go forward with a second reading unless there's proposed amendments. We can approve it tonight.
Yeah, I think our policy around this is actually not to approve it on first readings, to go to the second reading, just in the event that someone thinks of something after the fact that they didn't think of tonight, so it gives people an opportunity to sort of digest it a little bit more and then approve that at the second reading, so.
Candidly, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully ask that we look to consider this one simply because we are getting ready to take our winter break. Yes, it's only the course of a couple of different weeks. However, this is something that we'd like to be able to put in place, give the oversight to the school administration, in addition to we're heading into heating costs, and it's directly affecting and impacting us as we sit here today with each week that passes.
Why, is there someone that is gonna be impacted by this change?
Yes.
Oh, there is?
We'd be able to impact this because it's a change in our policy with part of the language on this is any existing permits as well.
I'd be in favor of voting on this one tonight if the rest of the committee would.
Yeah, how many people are impacted by this change?
It's one major group.
Is this board comfortable with voting, or do you need more time to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My opinion, it's always been our policy to take it to a second reading. I would feel more comfortable taking it to a second reading. I understand that there's a group that's gonna be impacted by it, I understand that, but it's, in my 9 years of being here, it's always been our policy that we do a first reading, then we take it to a second reading, and we vote either at the second reading or move it on again. But there's a lot of information here, and I personally would like a little bit more time to review it.
When you're referring to one group,
Mhm.
so I don't know if Kathy or Kevin, do we create a contract with these groups? So if a group comes in and says we want to rent out the facility, has that particular group rented, and have we committed to them for the course of the year, or how did that work?
I would be honest with you, I think Jerry would have to weigh in on that because we do have an existing permit. I don't know if the permit equates to contract. So that would be something that I would refer to Jerry to review on our behalf.
I think we had talked about putting an effective date in, and part of it is that we want to be able to give that team, it's not that we're looking to impact this and have it be effective January 1st. That would obviously be too short a time for any group to respond. We want to be able to give the group as much time as we can to be able to respond to that.
So we'll add this to the January 4th agenda.
Yep.
We'll do the, we'll just follow the
fine.
policy.
Yep.
All right, so next policy? Yusuf.
We actually went through all of them.
The, oh, you, okay,
We would,
so
I
the
did
turf
went through-
field?
Yeah, I went through each one of those. There's again, very similar. It was a lot of changes from school committee to school department.
Okay.
There was one area that wasn't redlined on the turf.
Was
I
it the
believe we
cost?
increased the hourly rate for the all other groups
Thought we did
at
as
the
well.
high school. So possibly on the second reading, I'll have that redlined with the new increase, the from and the to.
Okay. Okay, so we'll bring all three of them back for the 4th. All right. Kevin, you're up next for the report of the superintendent of schools, strategic plan statistics.
All right, great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Scott Harrison begged me to do a PowerPoint presentation. So, in the spirit of giving the holidays, you're welcome.
The next thing you're going to give me is your computer, and I'm trading it in for a pad of paper and a pen. But yes, thank you.
I already asked for it to be presented. So, Scott had actually, in all seriousness, asked for, at a previous meeting, some of the measures and some of the details of how we're, getting, actually implementing the strategic plan. And that's what I want to present to you tonight. If you go to the second slide, Craig. We've gone over this before, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, but for the folks viewing at home, our 4 big strategic levers are social emotional learning, growth-focused instruction, equity and access, and continuous learning. If you want to shift to the next one. I want to just talk about how to read the document really quickly, and everybody has a copy, not only in the packet, but also in front of you. And it's this document right here. I've got a few of them in front of you. And basically, the document is broken into the 4 areas representing each of the 4 strategic focus areas. So there's a section on growth-focused instruction, social emotional learning, equity and access, and continuous learning. Each section follows each strategy or measure through for 1, 2, or 3 years, depending on the strategy or measure. Some things are 1 year, one and done. Some things will go beyond the 3-year strategic plan as well. This is going to be an iterative process, so the district leadership team will be reviewing each area at the end of each school year and when updated data becomes available. So a lot of it we're going to review over the summer. MCAS data often doesn't become available till late in the summer, and so there'll be a couple different times a year where we're looking at different aspects of the plan. All right, so if you just want to open to the first page, just to give you an example, and it's this packet right here, the one with the... So if you look at continue to develop student-centered, high-engagement classroom experiences. There's a box for that and some information for 2017. If you go, I believe it's 3 pages in, you'll see the same thing for 18-19, and I think another 2 or 3 pages in for 19-20. And that's similar for all the, and it's a little tough to follow the way it's laid out. What I want to do today, Craig, if you can go to the next slide, is I want to do just a really brief review, and Craig's going to be jumping in as well, of the 4 strategic focus areas. And then I want to provide 2 to 3 examples, because there's no way we're going to go through all of these 37 pages in any level of real detail. But if there's any particular area as you're looking over either tonight or, you're doing some light reading over the holidays. I'm looking at you, Mike Walsh. Shoot me an email and I can present, or Craig can present in a little more detail on any aspect of this, because we want to make sure that you completely understand it and feel comfortable with it. Okay, the next slide. We've talked about each of the 4 areas, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. So Craig, do you want to jump in with growth-focused instruction?
Okay, so growth-focused instruction, and again, on a lot of these, we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of our initiatives, but these are some of the target areas that we're focused on this year. Particularly the math. We're looking at math achievement and growth. We've brought in ST Math in Woodland, and we're looking to expand that to the other elementary schools. Project Lead the Way is an initiative that for STEM and STEAM, which also incorporates math. It's a hands-on curriculum. We're looking to expand that from Woodland to Stacy into the high school. Blended Learning Initiative, that's computers and bringing the technology into the classroom and making sure teachers are able to use that technology when they're instructing the students. We're going through and selecting and hiring, supporting new teachers. We're growing our mentoring program. We're going to recruitment fairs, and we're also going to build our own recruitment fair in-house later on in the year. Continuing to develop our early college, high school track for our students. Curriculum mapping, it's an ongoing process that we've started and will continue all the way through. And part of the curriculum mapping will be devising common assessments and revising our assessment grid and looking at the assessments that we have, making sure that those assessments are tied to the standards. So math achievement and growth. So I don't think it's a secret that our math isn't growing in the way that we would like to see it grow, and our achievement scores are a little lower than the state. However, we have made gains this year, and what this slide shows is that in the high school, for example, in the grades 3 through 8, we trail the state scores by 7 points, and in grade 10, we're trailing by 3 points. We're hoping that over this year, we're going to cut those in half, and we're hoping for a range of between 40 and 60 in student growth percentile, hopefully closer to the 60 level, which represents good, strong growth, a year's worth of growth. So how are we going to do that? As a district, we're looking at our math learning, our time on learning, all the way through, particularly, in the 5th grade range. We're really looking at that area because in the elementary schools, they have upwards of 60 to 75 minutes of math instruction, in some places 90 minutes of math instruction, and right in 5th grade it drops down between 45 and 50 minutes a day. So how can we increase that? But more importantly, what are we doing during that time? How are we making sure that we're using that time effectively? So what are effective instructional practices that are happening in our math classes, and try to model those and showcase those to the other teachers so that all of our students are exposed to those kinds of instructional practices. Developing power standards, looking at what our students need, the absolute essential skills that our students need, in building assessments that measure those so that we can be sure that when a child leaves 2nd grade, they'll have the essential skills to help them be successful in 3rd grade. And if they're not, we need to know early so that we can effectively intervene. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm about to interrupt you. Can you back up 1 second? The last slide, just for 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it isn't important. It is important to see where you rank among your peers within the state. But do you have the ability, even if you get back to us the next meeting, the meeting after, can you take Milford and communities that are like Milford with the very diverse children that we educate, and then see where our numbers are compared to those other communities? Because when you're comparing yourself to the state, you're comparing all communities, but not all communities are dealing with the diversity that we are in the Milford Public Schools. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. But I'd like to see where we rank against other communities that are very similar in the Milford School District.
Mike, what the state does, if you don't mind me jumping in for 1 second, Craig. What the state does, they have data is called DART data, which they basically compare and they do it with every district in the state. There's probably 8 to 10 districts that they determine as the most like your district, based on a number of factors from demographics to size, and there's a few other metrics they look at, and they pick 8 to 10. We've reviewed those as a district.
So those numbers do take
They're
that
not
into
in the short
consideration.
presentation, but we can share those with you. It's very easy to get the information.
Thank you.
Along those same lines, just to jump in, along those same lines, because I think Mike brings up a good point, comparing
ourselves to like districts. But I think also just as, and we're going to go through budget in just a moment, we're all getting ready for budget season. One of the ongoing conversations we've been having is around school choice. Though it looks like we're starting to, I believe we may have stopped the bleeding, and we're hopefully starting to turn that tide. One of the challenges that we have historically faced, Mike, and you know this because we've talked about it during these meetings, which is we are not surrounded by like communities, and our school choice that we're experiencing in Milford is not going to like communities. They're going to close surrounding communities. So along those same lines, I think it is valuable information to look at how we rank compared to similar type communities from a demographic perspective to all that point. I would also like to see in that same light then the surrounding communities, our most closely touching communities, particularly ones, because we know our primary school districts that our school choices are going to are Holliston, Medway, some in Hopkinton, some in Medway, a little bit to Hopedale, but certainly predominantly to Medway and Holliston. So if we can look at sort of our surrounding area as well, and being able to just kind of look at it really in 3 different stages. How do we do against the state? How do we do against like communities? And also how do we do against our immediately surrounding communities? Just so we have a pretty good overarching community,
And I would agree with that, but I think what happens is what I want to make sure of is in everyday life, we all have room for improvement, but I don't want to send a message to our educators and our administration that they're not doing a good job. Because they could look at something like this and say, ooh, because they are doing a good job.
Well, we have some slides ahead that's going to show some of the growth.
Okay.
The key to all this is having that baseline and demonstrating growth, regardless of what the communities around us or similar communities are doing. Right? We just want to show that Milford is improving, and so that's what you're essentially doing here is creating that baseline that we're going to measure going forward.
Yep. Okay. I'm sorry, let me get back on track here. Here's an example. This is an example of a math intervention course that was put into place last year at Milford High School. And unfortunately, we get the funding. When the funding came through, it was around midway through, maybe October, November. So schedules were established. But there was about 100 students that were needs improvement or warning in the 8th grade MCAS test. So those are the kids that were targeted to go into this math intervention course. Between those scores and teacher recommendations, they had a cohort of kids in the sophomore class. Unfortunately, again, it was the schedule was already established, so we couldn't get all 100 kids into this course. 32 kids ended up taking the course, and you can see that's that top line there, the top color. The 32 kids that took the course, let's see, out of 32, there was 20 kids, 20 out of 32 demonstrated high growth. So we felt like this is an effective course that we want to try to get more kids into. So this is one of the areas that we're looking for. How can we expand this program so that more sophomores, more freshmen can get into this course, and we can set them up for success as they go into their sophomore MCAS exam. And the bottom line is, are the kids that weren't able to take that course. I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, I mean, the visual clearly illustrates
Unfortunately.
the impact of
Unfortunately.
that course having
But-
on those students.
And really, what we did with this course is the kids were getting a double dose of math. So they had the regular math course, and then they were going to this class. And unfortunately, something has to come out of their schedule when that happens. And what they took out was the sophomore wheel. So the sophomore seminar, basically specials, health. Like there's a couple other courses in there.
Sure.
So they had to take that out and put this math course in. And you know, as important as specials are, in order for kids to be successful, this is what they needed right then. They needed this math course. So.
Craig, we have one question
Yeah,
here.
just, I mean, and we talked about this, Craig, when we were talking the other day.
Yeah.
This is all, and Milford has a demonstrated history, so for those that may be watching at home and certainly here in the room, and other committee members, a number of years ago, our math scores were actually really, really good. And our math results were very, very strong. It was actually our English, our language arts scores that were actually struggling. So what was done was there was a plan that was put in place, and it was really focused on. We put some additional support and weight behind it as a school committee, and what happened? The teachers responded, the students responded, and the results got better. During that time, to Craig's just point is that, you know, we can't be all things to all people sometimes. So what ended up happening is the focus and the energy and effort was really put into language arts. The results got better. During that same time, now the math scores have pulled back. My concern is, and this is where I do want to make sure, and we talked about this the other day, Craig, is when we get into budget season is, I have all confidence that with this additional attention and focus, that these results will get better. The proof is right there, right? That's a great example of what our teachers and what our students are able to do when they've got the additional time and support to be able to do that. My concern is that it turns into a giant game of whack-a-mole, where we focus on language arts, the results got better, the math scores dropped. So now we're going to focus on the math scores, and my concern is I don't want the language arts scores to fall because we start to focus on math. I want to make sure that we're continuing to see the growth that we've seen and enjoyed over the time by us supporting it and giving that extra effort and energy and time and scheduling to keep the language arts scores strong at the same time as we're seeing that level of growth, which is phenomenal, with our students and giving that level of support to both. I want to make sure that we're not taking our eye off the ball with one. And I don't think it's this, and I say us, I mean, it's us, it's our attention, it's our focus, it's the administration. I don't think it's, to your point, Mike, this is not, I don't see this as a failure of students or of teachers. It's that we need to make sure that we're giving them the tools and support to be able to do that. And that would be my fear as a committee member, is because unfortunately, I've seen this movie before. And I don't want it to happen again. I don't want history to repeat itself in that way.
So that's a fantastic
That's a great segue.
I feel like Scott's a plan for us tonight. So if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, you already did. Perfect. So we
I
can't,
read the script.
we can't obviously just focus on math or ELA, even though, you know, I think generally our ELA scores tend to be around the state average or a little above, depending on the grade level. In math, we tend to struggle. We're struggling a little bit more right now. We brought in a new program. We piloted a new program. Well, before I get into this, anytime we put a new intervention in, whether it's the ST Math that Craig talked about, which is an online visual math program at Woodland, or the course, we can never go fully all in because we want to see some results, and then you're going to see a request for an investment in this year's budget. We're going to ask for another math teacher because in math there's really no electives, and so when we add sections, we need teachers to teach those sections. So our goal for the 18-19 school year is to add a math teacher, which will ensure that every student who needs the intervention course gets the intervention course. And the data that we collected, I think, proved not only in growth but also in achievement, and you didn't see the achievement slide, but it gave you a sense, and the achievement was very similar, that this type of programming works. And it also, I had a theory that when we shifted from the block to the traditional schedule, and we basically kids had, I think, the equivalent of 3.5 math courses, now they have 2. So that especially the at-risk kids, they've lost a lot of time on learning with math. This helps bring it back, and we're seeing the results based on the pilot year. Now we want to bring it kind of more broadly to scale. The second example of this is writing with colors. And I want to read the definition. This is from Eamon Cunningham, who's our curriculum team leader at the high school in ELA. And he brought this program in last year, and initially I was very skeptical. And I'm going to read what it is, and I'm going to try to explain it to you. Writing with colors is a structuralist approach to the teaching of writing, intended to help students identify and internalize the conventions of well-developed text-based writing through a system of simple color coding. Through some of its basic features, has clear links to the writing expectations of MCAS. It is important to emphasize this is not merely a test-taking strategy. It has the broader takeaways of helping to improve in-class compositions in general, in ELA or other courses, by helping students understand the logical links behind their compositions, and to see how all the parts hang together into a larger coherent whole. So basically what happens with this program is all the students in a writing class, we're about to do a writing assignment, have, is it 4 or 5 highlighted
believe
colors?
5.
I think it's 5 colors. And what they do is they basically code the text that they're reading from with colors, and like say, blue is evidence, and I'm wrong about the colors, and the kids, the people at home are probably yelling at me right now, but there's transition statements, there's conclusions, and they do the same thing in writing. So when they finish the assignment, they can visually see, do they have enough evidence to answer the question? Do they have a clear introduction, a clear conclusion, whether it's a single essay or response question, a 5-paragraph essay, or a longer assignment. It works for every type of writing. And I was watching, and Craig was in there too, and it's incredible. I was watching the gentleman who does the professional development for our teachers do it, and I was sitting next to a couple students, and I said, does this make any sense to you? And the kid explained it like a lot more articulately than I am right now, and said, yeah, because it's, because they can visually see it, and it makes the writing process, which can be difficult for a lot of students, very visual and very clear. And so through the implementation of this program last year, we actually saw a pretty healthy bump. And I'm going to go to the next slide, Craig. And we're expanding the program this year and going to further expand it the following year. Our MCAS scores in ELA, in general, our MCAS scores the last 4 or 5 years have been pretty good. The growth hasn't been great. The achievement has been good. But our achievement jumped up 4 points. So we're above the state last year. Our growth jumped up 16.5 points, which is an incredible leap. And other schools and districts who've used this program have seen similar growth kind of over time. Additionally, if you look at the math growth isn't as robust, but we were trailing the state by 7 points in 2016. We actually cut that to 3 this year, so we more than hit our 50% reduction target. Our SGP is an area where I'm hoping it will jump, and they're working on some instructional strategies as well at the high school to I think increase engagement, but I think are going to have an impact there, as well as the courses that Craig just talked about.
Kevin, just for the benefit of those that are watching at home, can you just, what's SGP?
SGP is student growth percentile, and basically what that means is 40 to 60 is considered kind of a year's worth of growth. Anything above 60 is high growth. Anything below 39 is less than a year's growth potentially, and it's a median number. It's not an average.
So I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. So on the left-hand side of the screen, the student growth was 52.5. So that's
really good.
That's really good growth.
Yep.
And on the right-hand side of the screen for math, it was a 32% growth, which is on the weak side. We want that to be above 40. Is that the number? Is that the target?
40 to 59 is considered good. 60 and
Okay.
above is considered fantastic.
Okay. So ideally, we'd love to see that above 60.
Correct.
We'd be willing to
Correct.
accept
because
59.
because it's a median number. It's tough to consistently get there. But we have had some years across the board. We usually have 1 or 2 grade levels that show above that 60 growth in ELA. Sometimes in math, it tends to be more consistently in ELA over the last few years, anyways.
Yep.
So
and that goes back to what we just talked about.
It's exactly. So let's shift to accountability improvement from 2016 to 2017. You want to go to the next slide?
I don't know if we have that one on this one.
Okay. So we put the wrong one up there.
Yep.
All right. So if you go to your packet, your PowerPoint packet, which is this one, and it's right after the MCAS improvement numbers. So basically, our Progress and Performance Index, which is called the PPI, is basically how they measure accountability by school and by district. And for Milford High School, bless you.
Thank you.
And for Milford High School, that number has increased by 156% year over year. And that incorporates not only English and math, but also the science score. So our English scores and science scores were above the state averages. Science doesn't have growth because it only happens 3 different times. But in terms of the PPI is based on primarily, I believe, the achievement. In terms of narrowing proficiency gaps, growth and graduation rates, that increase was 138% year over year. They do these things called extra credit, and this is all how they develop the accountability. Extra credit for decreasing the percentage of failing and increasing the percentage of advanced students, we increased that by 300%, and our total points increased by 155%. So the high school did a pretty good job kind of improving where they were from 2016 to 2017 in terms of accountability. If you go to the next slide, which again is not up there, and I apologize for that, you can see kind of the accountability detail, and it goes through ELA, math, science, the high school, where they look at annual dropout rate, cohort graduation rate. In some cases, there's a dash. That means they didn't have enough students to measure in a particular area. So for EL, our EL bubble is starting to hit the high school now, and you're going to start to see accountability numbers connected to some of the EL metrics. But if you look generally in 2017 and compare it to the last 3 years, 2017 was our best year in 4 years, and I think it's because of some of the things that we put in place and the good work of the teachers and the school administration. And I think 2016 happened to be one of our worst years. And that can happen, and there are different cohorts of students. So we're hoping that the 2017 trend continues for 2018 and beyond, and we believe some of the interventions and some of the programs we're putting in place are gonna lead to that. And we said this before, we really don't want to chase test scores because that's really not in anybody's best interest. We really want students prepared for college and careers. And the test scores are an indication of their readiness in some cases, but we don't want to just game the MCAS. We want to prepare students for success in college, success in careers. And I think that's an important point. Because some schools have gone the direction of just doing English and math, and that's not a well-rounded education, and I think it's going to turn off a lot of our students. We want to be very effective, very efficient in the classroom and provide a well-rounded experience. I want to make that point clear too. If you go to the next slide.
Kevin,
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to, and I think you may have said it, but I just want to underscore it. So the data you're talking about right now is the data that's used for our accountability score. So that level 3 that we keep hearing, this is what drives that score.
Correct.
Determines whether you're level 1, level
Correct.
2, or level 3, right?
Yep. So that number is based on 5 years of data. So the most recent years have the highest weight. It's a weighted system, a weighted formula. So the most recent year is weighted the heaviest. Each year prior is weighted less and less. So if you're in level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, it usually takes a year or two for you to shift levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing that we're in a kind of a tricky accountability place too, because 3 through 8 is shifted to the next generation MCAS this year. And next year the high school is shifting to the next generation MCAS. So the DESE has kind of put the accountability process on hold to some extent because there's new tests. And they did the same thing when they initially put the MCAS out. They did the same thing with PARC when we did PARC for a couple of years. So we're in kind of a weird assessment time too. So it's kind of a funky time to be, trying to make shifts because the high school is going to have a whole new test next year, similar to the one that's occurred in grades 3 through 8. So it's called the next generation MCAS. Does that answer your question?
It does. When you look at the chart, this is the chart that Josh put together, right? Or did you?
That's right from the DESE.
From DESE, okay.
Yeah.
And the color coding really tells a story here, right? 2016 is red almost across the board,
Yep.
right? So that you could see why it would be considered a level 3. 2017 is almost green across the board. So to your point, if we see the same type of results next year, now we have 2 solid years.
Right.
We have a weaker year dropping off, which
Right.
would potentially help move us.
Absolutely,
To another
absolutely.
level,
So
right.
it tends to take, and again, the whole account, and I can't even make predictions at this point because the whole accountability formula is in flux, and there's some proposals on the table, but I don't know what is going to land as the final kind of accountability guidelines for schools across the Commonwealth. And it's based on the federal legislation, the ESSA legislation that just passed recently. Okay. Any other questions on this particular? Right. The next slide, which again we don't have, and I apologize for that, is and this was directly from Principal Otland's analysis as well. Is it shows the top table shows our PPI scores the last 4 years. So I'm going to read this out because we can't put it on the screen. But in
Just define PPI again.
yeah, so that's performance, and I'm going to go back to, it's the Progress and Performance Index, and that's the basic driver for the accountability at any given school. All the schools' accountability is the driver for the district. Okay? Yep. So in 2014 it was 64, 2015 54, 2016 again 32, and then 2017 it jumped up to an 82. So 2016, I think, was our low water mark in terms of performance over the last probably decade. And 82 is the direction we want to see it go.
Do you have and you may not tonight, but do we have a diagnosis of, I mean, it looks, just based on looking at the results and the numbers that you're reading off and everything else, and it's a lot of data, which is great. We seem to have sort of fallen off a cliff in 2016, just thinking about the numbers. So 2014, we had 64%. 2015.
It's not a percentile, it's a number.
I'm
So
sorry,
yeah,
64.
That's important to know.
In 15, it was at 54. And then we went from 54 to 32.
Yep.
We dropped in half. And then the following year, we jumped back up to an 82. So,
So-
I agree that some of the measures are working, but we seem to have fell off a cliff and then jumped right back up. Was there something that
Well,
sort
you got to
of
remember
occurred?
too, it's a different class of kids each of those years.
I got it, but
Yeah.
that's a very significant
Yep.
drop off, and there's
Yep.
not. We talked about this over years. The demographics of all towns are shifting across the entire country. They didn't shift for one student. There's not one class, at least not that I'm aware of, that there's just that big of a gap generally, unless there's a driving event, and that's what I'm asking. Is there?
You know, in
Do you have a
terms of,
diagnosis
you
for
know,
it?
for 16, our ELA scores were a little lower too. Usually, like I said, usually our ELA scores are a little higher than
Yeah.
the state. Our math scores over the last decade have flipped a little above, a little below. Last few years, they've been below. I don't have a good answer to why 2016 was kind of a performance aberration compared to the rest of the years.
What class is this measuring? Is this all?
So this
all
would be,
grades?
so 2016 would be the current, help me out, current seniors.
So the current senior class.
Yep,
So this is the current senior class.
Correct.
Result, effectively, it's their results.
correct.
Okay, so just one of the things that we may want to look at from a diagnosis is there something that's different about that class throughout
Yep.
their educational experience in Milford? Like, for
Yep.
example, that class in particular, I happen to know was one of the classes that was moved around a lot during the Brookside restructuring. That was actually in their first and second grade years. They were actually not in their regular building. There was construction. They were moved into a different place. They were in Memorial. They were in a number of different places. Sometimes things like that can have an impact on things. So
Yep.
that, and I'm not saying that that's what it is. That's one thing I happen to know that may be different about that class that didn't impact some others.
Yep.
At least not in some of those years, and knowing that those
Yeah,
are formative
and-
years. And that may not be the diagnosis, but
Yeah.
is there something that we can go back to and say, okay, as we go forward, going with these strategic plans, knowing that, okay, what are things that changed? What's different about that class? You know, can we help diagnose it so that as we move forward, we're not having history repeat itself?
Yeah, I mean, I have a number of hypotheses, but they're not proven, so I don't want to like.
Yeah, no, I'm not
throw them out
looking for
there.
each, just if we can start to look at that.
Jen?
I feel like it's possible that these are aggregate scores. If you look at the slide above, I'm not sure that those are relative to a particular senior class. When you look a couple slides early, it talks about aggregate data. because seniors would not have taken the.
No, this
MCAS.
is
They
this is
would
the
have
current
taken
senior
it.
class. This is what they took 2 years ago. So they took this in 2000.
Okay.
They took the test in 2016. So in 17 they were,
So
so
this-
16 they were
okay.
sophomores, 17 they were juniors. This year they're the seniors.
Okay, okay. The only other thing that I will say is just speaking from looking at what happens from year to year. You know, I know even looking at the 5th grade a couple of years ago in my school where we had something like 18 children on IEPs, and then the next year you look at the 5th grade again and you
Yeah.
might have 3 or 4 students. So the cohorts are so distinctly different, which is one reason why it makes it difficult to compare year to year. And I think it's also why a lot of districts say nobody wants to celebrate too loudly when they do really well on the MCAS one year, because the very next year you could be
Correct,
in a different place. But the only other thing that could be a cause for some of this is the change in the mass frameworks. And the MCAS each year has incrementally focused more on the 2011 version of the
Right.
frameworks, and districts, we've all been kind of scrambling to look at what are we teaching in what kind of chronological order over the course of the year, because the expectation is that the MCAS has continued to change year by year. We're at this point right now, I think we're almost 100%, if not 100%, maybe with the exception of science, at the newest set of frameworks. So that particular cohort might have been kind of a casualty of that kind of tricky place where the test wasn't always reflective of what was being taught in the classroom.
Yeah, and that's why I think I would just ask that it's just like anything else. It's very difficult to have a prescription for healing without being able to diagnose. And to your point, Jen, it could be, yeah, this class is just a little different. Okay, that's fine. But I would ask that we really make sure, because it's things like, you know, what were other things? That class was in 8th grade going into the freshman year. Their freshman year in high school was the first year we moved away from block scheduling. And we went to the 7-drop-1. That was their freshman year. They were a class that was moved around. They were in first grade when they were not in their regular school because Brookside was under construction. And again, none of those things may have had anything to do with it, but are there things that, so there are some learnings, and we need to make sure that we're diagnosing these
So we
things?
look at data from a few different ways, and one way is we look at a cohort analysis. So we'll follow like the class of 2016 from 3rd grade all the way through 10th grade, and we'll look at that data. And we'll also look at like how is the 10th grade performing, how is the 8th grade performing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is more of like a class base, and then we'll look at trends and patterns over time. Great questions though, great questions. The bottom piece is just, and I want to bring people's attention, the committee's attention to this as well, is the continuous improvement in AP participation and performance. And if you look at 2010, we had 55% of our students receiving 3s or better on the AP exams, and we had 267 tests administered. So basically 267 students participating in the program. 7 years later, not only did the number of test takers improve dramatically to 446, but the scores also rose 6 points to 61% of our students getting 3s or higher. So we've really pushed broad participation, but we're also seeing an increase in achievement as well. So those are two very, very positive trends. The next slide, which is I also believe isn't there, is just some highlights to the high school. 2017 graduates attending top universities, and we talked about this, but Harvard, Yale, Princeton, among many others. AP course offerings, we have 19 subjects that we offer AP courses in. 32% of students in grades 10 through 12 participate in those courses. Again, 61.4% of those students received a 3 or higher. And this is the best we've seen in 10 years of publicly available data. So it's a trend that continues to get better. The one thing that might shift that trend is we're looking at early college, and we're offering 2 courses in the spring. We offered 2 courses last year as well. We'll offer 3 total this year. And we're working with the Mass Teachers Association, Mass Bay Community College, Quinnipiac Community College, and Framingham State University to expand the offerings in 2018 and 19 and beyond. And the goal, and I'll talk about that a little bit later when we hit on another area. MCAS readiness, we're scaling up with writing with colors from a pilot last year to a more full implementation this year and even more full implementation in 18-19, scaling up the MCAS Math 10 course as well, following a similar path from pilot to broader implementation to full implementation. Instructional technology, the infrastructure, building-wide wireless network. We have grade 9 Chromebooks. We'll have 10 through 12, so every student will have a Chromebook at the start of September. And again, all students are using individual monitor accounts with a full Google Suite, and that's changing how things are happening in the classroom, I think, in very positive ways. All right, so we'll shift to social emotional learning.
That slide is over there.
That slide's in there, yeah. You know, we had 2 versions of it, and I think I just popped the wrong version up on the screen, unfortunately. But you all have in your packets the full version, and we'll make it available.
I was just gonna say, we'll post this up to
Yeah,
up to our website.
Yep.
Great.
Social emotional learning, we're basing social emotional learning on the CASEL competencies. There are 5 of them. Self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Some of the programs that we're looking at are up on the slide. We're developing social emotional competencies in the faculty. Second step, which I'll hit on in a second, but that's something that we're looking to move K to 8. We're working on this with our marketing communications initiatives. Responsive classroom, we're kind of looking at responsive classroom as another way. It's a program that can be brought in. We're going to check out second step first and then see if we need to bring in something else like responsive classroom. Co-teaching, giving our teachers professional development around co-teaching and making sure that when we do have 2 teachers in a room, they know how to work together to deliver instruction. Development of some new programs like mindfulness and Box. We do have professional development around the SEL competencies, and just trying to come up with ways to continue to build positive school culture and classroom cultures. Strategies to increase school attendance, and then we're also exploring our start times at the secondary level, and our continued SEL and Wellness Committee. Some of the I think
we skipped that one.
I went through all
Yeah.
that, right? All right. So the second step is it's a curriculum that is delivered or can be delivered K to 8. Right now, we have a program running at the middle school and also at pre-K to 2. Woodland we're going to implement next year. We ask the teachers there are lessons that teachers teach with second step. It's a social skills class that helps them build academic success. Additionally, there is a bullying prevention unit that goes along with it too. So we're looking to go full implementation with this program. All right, and the other thing that we've started this year is a partnership with Community Impact, which is a health agency in the community. Some statistics. Unfortunately, there are some social and emotional issues that our staff just really can't handle, and some of our students need help not only in school but outside of school. So we've been able to connect students with Community Impact, and Community Impact has come into our schools and provided services for students in schools and then carried that outside of school.
So, Greg, just real quickly on that, can you just back to that side for a second?
Yeah.
So, along those lines, when you say they're beyond the capacity of what we're able to help with in the classroom and what else, are you, without specifically calling out, are you talking about significant mental health issues?
Yeah, it's emotional issues.
Emotional and mental health issues that really require far more attention and care than than what would be reasonable to expect in a public setting.
The other, well, no, I would say the other
More
piece, Scott, yeah,
specialized.
no, it's still, the students are still educated in the public setting, but what,
I don't mean educated in the public setting, I mean to address those particular
Yeah,
mental health
so-
issues. It's just, there's additional support that's needed for those students, for those that are dealing with those particular issues. We're still able to educate them, but they need additional support with that particular area.
yeah, so this partnership is really solving two issues. Issue number one is we're seeing a growth in the percentage, in number of students who would benefit and be supported by counseling services. Two, if you've ever tried to get counseling services for your child, you know it's nearly impossible to get an appointment in the afternoon, evening, or on a Saturday. And so what this partnership does is it provides those counseling services during the day for students that they can access through their private insurance.
Oh, great, excellent. That's good.
Yeah, so I think it solves two issues. I think that, the growing percentage of students that would benefit from counseling and two, access to those counselors.
Great, thanks. Sorry, Craig.
That's okay. Just the next slide is some statistics around that. This is the current year, number of students that are being seen inside of school, and this is starting in Brookside, going all the way through Milford High School. We have about 75 students right now that are being seen inside the school setting. So, and it doesn't mean that our I don't want people to get this impression. It doesn't mean that our school staff isn't seeing these kids either or providing services with them, because they are also. This is above and beyond what our school is doing for them.
Great, just a question, wrapping back to this, and maybe you don't know this and you can get back to me, but are any of our students, this new school that Joe and I attended last year, the grand opening that's up and on Industrial Way, that Frank Saber,
Yep. I can't think of it.
former chairman of the hospital, I can't think of the name of the school. Do we have any students that are in that program?
I'm not sure.
I'm not certain either, Mike.
Okay.
That's something we could check and get back to. I wouldn't want to answer on camera though,
Yeah.
because it could identify a particular.
Yeah,
student,
no.
because it's not a program.
No.
It's possible we do, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Okay.
All right, so equity and access, this is critically important. We want to focus on inclusive practices. We're going to continue to review, explore, and assess levels and pathways at Stacy Middle School and Milford High School. Outreach to families to increase engagement, differentiating and personalizing instruction, strategies to improve attendance, and increase access to the most rigorous courses and programs at the secondary level. Additionally, the development and growth of MPAC, which is the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and provide digital tools to support students learning in the classroom. We're gonna focus on a couple areas. Before I jump into equity and access, though, one of the things we're really trying to work on is how do we measure social emotional learning. And we actually met with a group this week that might help us do that. We're very early on in the process, but it's one of the areas where I think it's going to have an immensely positive impact on students' ability to access the curriculum. But sometimes it's difficult to consistently measure perception and how somebody feels. And so we're seeking some, and it's a relatively new, like, I don't want to say field or phenomenon, but a new area where I think a lot of schools are kind of struggling with how do you measure the impact, or, if you're putting dollars towards social emotional learning, what kind of return on investment are you getting? And it's tricky right now. It's one of those things that, although in my head I can't necessarily measure everything, I know in my heart it's having a positive impact. So before I move on to equity and access, I just wanted to say that. So we didn't see as much hard data on social emotional learning, but it's something I think all of our whole leadership team believes it's critically important, and I think it is having a positive impact.
Before you can even start to begin to tackle math issues and language arts issues, you have to get to the social emotional issues. If the student's not ready to learn, it's not going to happen. So I think it's critically important.
Yeah. And I think that goes into even some of the equity and access. I mean, this goes back to years ago. We used, when the student breakfast program was first introduced. I think it was probably back in the 60s and 70s. Was when they were first introducing the student breakfast program, and it was, well, a kid can't be expected to eat if they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not being fed at home because they're, for whatever reason, and they're starving, they're not going to be able to learn. They're not going to be able to do that. That's how the student breakfast programs came to be. It's the same thing with free and reduced lunch. You can't expect a student to to learn and be an effective student and be successful if they're malnourished. So that's along all those same lines, social emotional as well. I think it's a good next step, especially with all the ongoing conversations around the country around the impact of mental health and those challenges that everyone's facing. So.
And I think one of the things that I failed to mention is the focus on our staff's mental health. The scores bother them a lot too, and I think that they really take it to heart when they get attacked on scores, and we all know they're working really hard in the classroom, and they certainly are frustrated that it doesn't show in scores like an MCAS, which, but I think in the classrooms every day and things that I see in classrooms every day and I see on social media, I can see that things are positive. But I think it's critically important that we care and tend to our staff's social emotional wellness.
So to jump back to equity and access, the two areas we really want to give you some information on tonight, and there's a number of areas we're looking at, is our strategies to improve attendance. And there's a clear connection between student attendance and success in school. I forget who said it, but 95% of success is showing up. And so, we want every student there as often as possible. Obviously, if someone is ill, we don't want them in school. We also want students there, not only at school on time, but to class on time. Our goal is to have students' attendance be at or above the state student attendance average, which is 94.6 during the 2016-17 school year. Additionally, our goal is to reduce the number of tardies by 5% each year. Additionally, we're conducting information campaigns with families and being proactive in contacting families when issues arise, whether they're related to absenteeism or tardies. And if you look at Milford High School, during the first 60 days, which is what we have data for this year when we started kind of the focus on this, is that absences are down 9.1%. Chronic absenteeism, which is 6+ or more during the first 60 days, are down 14.5%. Tardies are down 33.6%. And chronic tardies are down 61.6%. We define chronic tardiness as 11 or more. So we're seeing good results there immediately. I don't anticipate this rate of improvement over time, but I think I think it came out of the gate like sprinting. If you look at Woodland, Woodland's goal was actually above the state average, which is 96.2% and above, and tardies at 2.4% and below. And both targets would be a 25% improvement on last year's data. Between September 15th and December 15th, the average attendance was 96.2%, which is right at the goal, which is very good. The average tardies was 2.4%, which exceeded the goal, which is also fantastic. And I know Tim, Chris, and his team are really focusing on that and sharing information with families. The second example, we want to increase access to most rigorous courses at the secondary level for all students. And that's continuing long-term growth in increasing participation rates of underrepresented students in honors classes, AP, and early college courses. We want to expand the early college course offerings to 3 courses this year, and target underrepresented populations for enrollment, sustain long-term drive for honors and AP participation, and use the data to better recruit underrepresented students. We also want to develop metrics in this area to support longitudinal analysis of progress in this area. And Josh Otland and his team are looking at kind of the data over the last, I want to say 3 to 10 years, and trying to come up with reasonable goals over the next 3 years. And we're still in the process of analyzing that.
So when do you think you'd have
I think by the
goals to go along with
I think by the end of this year we'll have a better sense of that, because it's our first time with early college,
Yep.
and we want to kind of incorporate early college into the process. If you go to the next slide, it's early college expansion. And I talked about this briefly a few minutes ago, but we have a partnership with Framingham State, Quinsig, and Mass Bay to offer students access to college courses that will provide them with an authentic post-secondary experience while they're still in high school, and will support student success, college admissions, and college degree completion. Again, we're implementing 3 courses this year, 5 courses in 2019, and 10 courses in 2020 through our partner institutions. We've applied for an early college pathways grant with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we're going to find out about that shortly. The thing is, we don't want to randomly throw courses out there and have kids kind of throw darts at a board if they're interested or not interested. But we want to put pathways together that lead to degree, certificates, micro-credentialing in areas including manufacturing, biotechnology, agriculture, automotive repair, and a couple of others. And actually, here's the list of potential pathways. So business, computer science, education, engineering, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, agriculture, agribusiness, and tourism. The components of these programs wouldn't just be the courses, but we want the pathway, internships during the senior year. We're going to try to develop a more robust internship program and continue to grow our industry partnerships. We have great industry partnerships right now through our hotel and hospitality program. I think Ms. Braza was participating in that program, is actually going on to study that in college, as well as our business and banking program with Milford Federal. Even taking one early college course will increase the likelihood of college success and degree attainment, because you get a taste and a flavor of not only the course but the expectations, and kids tend to have more success if they've had experience taking a college course as a high school student. All right, Craig, you're up.
Continuous learning. We have 3 specific examples of continuous learning that we're focused on this year, and actually they're built on from last year. But I do want to point out, we have I think some great ideas of how we can personalize professional development. Really, what our stumbling block is the amount of time that teachers have contractually to do any kind of professional development. We're down to 1 hour a month, and usually that's a faculty meeting where the faculty gets together, and then 5 half days. Keep in mind that one of the half days is a conference, another half day is used for placement of students. So really down to 3 half days where teachers can get some professional development. And then there's 2 full professional development days, but they're both at the beginning of the year. So we're really limited in the amount of time that we can actually get teachers together contractually and do any kind of professional development work. So hopefully we can think about that and find ways to grow that. The first example is technology, and I think all of us will agree that Matt Joseph and his team, Steve Weber, Sarah Boyle, and Braulio, have done a tremendous job getting into classrooms, helping teachers implement technology and really figure out how to use Chromebooks and how to use the whole Google suite. So I think that's a great example of how we can embed professional development right into the school day with those tech teachers, integration specialists. Jen Orjani, and I think she came and talked to us about this a little bit. She secured some grant funding to get 16 teachers a master's program that's really going to benefit us over 5 years. Part of getting that master's program paid for is they have to provide professional development for other teachers in our buildings. And then finally, our Understanding by Design. It's just a different way of looking at growing. I'm sorry, I think I talked about this last time. Of curriculum design and thinking of where you want to be and then planning it backwards from there. And we've currently have got 110 teachers in an initial training and looking to do 50 or 60 more coming up in a couple months. So we're going to keep working through that. And as far as professional development goes, it can't be a one and done. It has to just be sustained. We can't just have a workshop like this and then walk away from it. We have to figure out different ways to get teachers together and still talk about some of the things that they've learned and really look at the units that they've created together. Otherwise, it's just dead in the water. So that brings us to our final slide.
Don't shed any tears, Craig, or Scott, we're almost done.
I know, the PowerPoint's almost over.
We got
I
another.
know, I know you just,
We got one more right after this.
Before you jump in, I just want to say three things, actually. One is, remember, these are just two or three examples from each of the areas. The bigger packet outlines, again, it's not all the strategies, because there's some school-based ones that we just didn't include, and we didn't want to make the document overwhelming. But if you want any information about any of these, we can present it at a future school committee. Two, we're going to be providing you updates over the course of the next 3 years on the progress on all these areas in a similar format. So you have that to look forward to. And three, it is going to be an iterative process. And as we jump into like the early college water and some of the other areas that are kind of a little bit newer to us, we're going to learn after a year or 2 years. It's interesting. We spent the morning at Marlboro High School, who has probably the most well-developed early college program in the state. And I've been to a ton of presentations, and I learned more with this guy in an hour than I've learned at a bunch of these other presentations. And there are things that we're going to be able to put into action almost immediately. So I think a lot of these things will be shifting as we learn more as we go.
Mr. Chairman, very well. So, first of all, thank you for putting this together and kind of giving us an outline here. I think this starts to create the framework for lack of a better term, but since we're talking about education, it seems appropriate, our report card of, we started talking about this last spring around the school improvement plans. How do we know that the school improvement plans are actually improving? And giving us sort of what that report card looks like, and we posed the question to the principals as they came through, really just as something to take away and start to think through. And I think you've done a good job. It's a good first step to start to pull this together, to start to create that. One thing that I think this creates that framework. I think that would be an ask as you're pulling this together is there's a lot that goes into this, and it should be. Also creating an executive summary page that sort of aggregates the data with a high-level overview that's sort of that 1 to 2 page executive summary that really acts as our report card. It is exactly that. It's that report card. And understanding that, yes, things like social, emotional, those are the soft skills. Those are the soft pieces that, as we talked about, if a child is worrying about their mental health and they're dealing with mental health issues, their focus on Shakespeare is probably going to be not what we'd like it to be, not what it needs to be in order to really absorb that.
Yep.
So we certainly understand that there's some soft skills that go along with that. As I think, to be honest with you, there is with everything. But if we could have, that would be one of my asks, is create an executive summary page. And I'm happy to hear that over the course of the next 3 years, it'll be an ongoing piece. Continuing to see the point-to-point reviews. I do truly ask, as we're going through this as well, that not just, and I don't think that we would, but not just with anecdotal information, but going back and really looking at things like that classroom that's where the 2016 results seem to have fallen off a cliff. What are the diagnoses behind that? So that if there's things as a school committee that need to change, if we find out that, in this particular group, is to Jen's point earlier, there's a spike in the number of special needs students. Okay, great. What support and results when we're thinking about it from a budget and policy, which is our primary charge as a school committee? What additional resources do we need to budget for that? This is what we've seen as the impact of the results. Great. We already talked about when we focus on things, results get better. How do we provide that additional support? Is it that, by the way, we change block scheduling? Okay, great. If we're going to make changes again, how do we make sure that we give that additional support behind it? I think it gives the committee that response. Again, to Jen's point, we don't want to celebrate too loudly when you get one good year. By the same token, we also don't want to be punishing our teachers or having our teachers kicking themselves terribly hard when the results are down for a year, because it's not, as I talked about earlier, that 1 year does not a trend make. But I think it is important that we learn from it, and if there's something that just seems way off, like the results for this one particularly did, it's important that we understand what that is, and understand that, If we saw one classroom where there was year over year over year, those results were really, really poor, okay, there's an individual accountability there. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about overall the results, we're seeing some progress. This was something that, is very important to me as a school committee member, and I think important to the community and our students. I'm happy to see that we're starting to build these frameworks and get that out there and really give ourselves a report card as a school district, and helps to build that line of what we need to do for sport. So, thank you.
So can I just 3 quick responses to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Very brief.
Yeah.
One is we're tying everything we do now to the strategic plan. So you're going to see the budget. Every new budget initiative request is going to be tied to one of those 4 areas. All the school improvement plans are tied to the strategic plan that were built last year. Even when we do leadership team meetings, every one of our agenda items is tied to one of the strategic areas or multiple strategic areas.
Yeah, if we do this, you get that. So,
Any other comments or questions from anyone on this side?
I'm good, Joe.
Mike.
Kevin and Craig and anybody that was involved putting this together, thank you very much. To Craig's point about social and mental health for our educators, I go back to the point that I made earlier, is that in no way do I want them to be watching this tonight and think that we're not doing, we as a committee don't believe they're doing a great job. Because there's a lot more in education, there's a lot more to educate a child than this. And I'm going to give you an example of it. I was at the Santa Parade, and I happened to be standing next to a teacher. I'll leave her name out of it. And across the street was a little boy screaming her name. She spotted him. And she ran across the street through the parade and gave him a big hug and a kiss and stayed with him for 5 minutes. And she came back across the street, and I looked right at her and I said, "It's not all about grades, is it?" She says, "No, it's not." And that's the point that we have to make tonight. Thank you, this is important data, but there's a lot more issues that get dealt with in our schools every single day, and our educators do a great job. To Scott's point, the child that comes to school hasn't eaten. The child that comes to school from a single parent. The child that comes to the school at the high school level that just doesn't want to be in school. And our educators deal with that, and they do a great, great job. So I'm not saying that this isn't important, but what I'm saying is that when we talk about education, we need to look at all the factors that are involved in education. Thank you.
I just also want to thank you for the amount of work that went into putting this together for us. And I think each of the areas that you focused on are critically important. And I think there's a lot of overlap amongst the 4 areas, and that's because there's nothing that we do in a school in isolation. And when you mention the word overwhelming, I think it can be overwhelming. Kind of some of the things you talk about, Mike, and that you mentioned, Scott, we're dealing with little human beings and their families. And I just watched this great video, which I'll share with you. It was all of 1.5 minutes long. It was an Edutopia, and it was about social emotional learning and wellness. And it talked about, as a teacher, you think, wow, they keep adding things to my plate and they're not taking anything away. And the point of the video was that social and emotional learning isn't adding something to the plate, it is the plate. And if we don't start with that and we don't have that foundation for our students, you think about the MCAS, and the MCAS originally started as a way to measure our work towards curriculum. And over time, it's really morphed into something that people you think about their property values, and they hold that as one measure. And I think we have to keep harping on the fact that it is one measure, and it's a really important measure, and it's a public measure, but all of these other pieces, including student engagement. And the only one thing that I was a little concerned about was when I saw that right now we had what somehow was categorized as 64% student engagement, and I'm not sure if that was very unscientific or what.
Well,
really
I think we
based
can
on.
talk about that in more detail. I think it's a little
Okay.
more complex than that, because I think that's a pretty high bar, what we're looking for.
And so I think to the point about that, we really want to arm our educators with the tools and the opportunities to engage students, and being well-versed in how to make them feel comfortable and how to really understand the whole child. No matter what age level that you're at, you're not going to get there unless we have tools to engage and the strategies and techniques to really understand the hardships that some of our students are facing. So I think, you know, I think it's great work, and I think it's moving us in the right direction. And when you think about what are the things that high-performing school districts are focusing on, that's what's in this plan. So, thank you.
Yeah, so earlier this year, you outlined the goals as part of the strategic plan. You've now defined how we're going to measure success, and you touched on it a minute ago. The next step now is put some dollar values around these initiatives as part of the budgeting process that we're going to start shortly after the holidays. And as far as this committee is concerned, that's our job now, right? Is to find the financial resources to be able to support them and be able to support the plan. So we're looking forward to starting those conversations and finding out, you know, what the expenses are going to be associated with some of these initiatives, and then advocating for the funding that's needed. Any other? We lose somebody?
Yeah.
Jim.
All right. Let's move on to the next agenda item. So school start times?
Yeah, this is really brief. I just want to update the committee on where we are in the process. We met internally as kind of a leadership team. We had a number of folks represented, and we want to pull a committee together in probably start in February. We'll recruit in January. That includes school personnel, community members, obviously Len Morcone, our transportation director, Peter Boucher, our athletic director, and Dr. Perriello, and really try to look at all the issues connected to it, and do a little more research, and then make a proposal. And this is actually included in the strategic plan under equity and access. But our goal is to hopefully make a proposal during the 2018-19 school year, and if, you know, depending on what the recommendation is, we'll develop a plan. So that's all I have there. Very brief.
Included within that, will that include community forums? I apologize if you said that.
Yeah, we'll get feedback. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that's going to look at this point, but we'll get feedback from folks in the community.
No, I think that's important. I think you know, there's all kinds of evidence that says that this is something that needs to be reviewed. I'm having visions of the WBZ News broadcast of Boston Public Schools that happened earlier this week, where there were buses of parents that were going before the school board and to the schools because of a change in this and the impacts on them. And we talked about this. There's impacts that are far more reaching than just a difference in just a schedule shift. It's childcare issues. It's things that candidly I didn't even think about from a childcare issue. It's not just, well, the daycares are open for the younger students, or we'll just extend our extended day program and things of that nature. I have a high school student who right now gets home before my elementary school student, and the high school student watches the elementary school student, and they take care of them. And that's a child care issue when we change that schedule up, and now the elementary school, the first grader is home before the 10th grader is. And that becomes a challenge, and making sure that we weigh all and hear those voices. So I'm glad to hear that.
It's complicated.
It is. It's not an easy fix.
It's all complicated, but this is particularly complicated.
All right, seeds of happiness.
I guess the Happiness Seed project started this summer, I would say. Lucy Jenkins was able to secure some happiness seeds as part of our SEL initiative through a grant with Castle. And I'm going to show you a video in a little bit, but I believe she came and gave everyone a happiness seed, right? Mm-hmm. So we all know what they are. The little, maybe the public doesn't. The little balls of clay painted with smiley faces. Simple, small little things. But she and Lisa White approached me probably around October and asked me to put together a presentation for all the Milford High School students. And they gave me a date of December, whatever it was, the last half a day, December 8th. So I was trying to figure out a way to hook and engage students and really work towards our SEL initiative. So I took a focus of 3 different things: goals, relationships, and support. So when I talked to the students, I talked to them about setting goals and having good relationships that'll get you towards those goals, and then finding adults within the building who can help you reach your goals as well. And then we finished it up with this Happiness Seeds video. I think for me, I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was going to go about really trying to engage 1,200 high school students and making sure that the message was there and it was clear that, you know, people in the building care for you, but at the same time you got to take care of yourself. Really, is really what it got down to. And I think it's important that teachers take time to tell their story and really tell how difficult it was for them growing up and for kids to be able to relate to that. I think it humanizes their teachers a little more. And I think with all this talk of MCAS and accountability, sometimes that stuff gets lost. And that's the important thing that makes it so that kids can connect to teachers and they are willing to learn from their teachers. So that's the part that I think has gotten lost in the last couple of years, and I think is coming back around where we are encouraging teachers to spend more time and talk to their kids about, you know, how are you feeling and relationships, and I think that's what Second Step is going to bring into our elementary schools. But I'm seeing it also in the secondary and high school as well. But we are going to bring this project down, so middle school is next. But I want to show the video. I just have to get up and...
Jim, while he's doing that, can you comment on because you saw a little bit of Craig's presentation.
I did, yeah. It was excellent. What I felt was most compelling about Craig's presentation was he shared a lot of personal perspective from his own life. And the most compelling thing from that presentation was a VHS videotape that you opened your presentation with, which depicted a horrific personal tragedy that you went through in your life that I thought was extremely vulnerable to share with not only the school but whoever saw that. And it really showcased how, you know, your family and your extended family are significant in your life and continue to show support and help get you through some of the most tragic and also some of the best times of your life. So I was particularly moved by Craig's presentation because I felt it was very compelling, and it was very emotional and very telling, and it showed obviously how he was able to transcend that experience and what his more vertical world meant to him after that. Thank you.
All right, so Seeds of Happiness. You know about the happiness seeds?
A little bit.
You do, huh?
Why is this being recorded?
Don't worry about it. So I'm giving you that because you make me smile. Every time I see you, you turn my day around.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to give you another one, though, because I want you to give it to somebody else.
Every time I see you, you bring a smile to my face. That is so cute. Oh my God, thank you. You complain all the time. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. So I know my father said I have your past, but you're going to see your happiness. And now it's up to you to pass that along to someone. Thank you. You're welcome. See, so it's perfect. Oh, this is You're welcome.
It's a seed that makes me feel happy every time I see them. So you're supposed to hold on to the seed, and it's going to make you feel happy every time you look at it. Because you make me happy every time I see you. It's a seed of happiness.
Thank you. Did you make me happy? Oh, no, stop. So now. Okay, what is this? Oh my goodness! Oh, thank you, honey. That's very nice. Because I love you and you make me very happy.
Me too. This is Seed of Happiness because you make me happy every time I come to school. And you're the reason I come to school.
Can I give you a hug?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
That's for you though. You're so
For being a great kid and making my day happy.
My favorite teacher is for you. Seed of Happiness. Make me happy. I get excited to come to your class.
Wait, I gotta give you a seed of happiness.
What? I love that.
There you go.
Mr. Bell.
Hello.
It's the happiness seed.
Thank
Seed
you.
of happiness. You make me happy.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Thanks. This goes to you because you make me happy.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
Carl, what do you need?
Here's a seed of happiness.
What does this mean? Oh, okay, thank you. You make me happy by just being a good student and doing good stuff in class. Thank you. There you go. Mr. Ryan. I'd like to give you a seed of happiness. A seed of happiness I'd like to give you.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. Tremendous advocate for Milford High School. Thank you. You're welcome. Congratulations. Thank you. How are you? I'm bringing this order today.
I am bringing you a seed of happiness because you make me happy because I appreciate all the things that you do for me in the classroom.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
You're welcome.
So it's important to note that that was totally unscripted. Hopefully you got that from that video, but.
That's the persistent question of why is there a camera behind?
No, but you know, I guess the grand idea was we really wanted to see, once I started it, how far it would actually go, but we didn't have enough time for that. I think it turned out great, and John Giacomuzzi, who's a student here, he was the one behind the camera. He and Jeremy Folster edited what needed to be edited and put that together. So I think it turned out fabulous, and it got a little bit of attention. We were on the radio for it, and I can't remember the guy's name, Mark something. The person who made Happiness Seeds, he ended up going on the radio and talking about the video and how much it affected him, and so I think it turned out well. I was pleased with it. So.
I will tell you that one made it home into my house from a freshman who was fairly nervous in a first experience on the high school swim team, and one came home as kind of a compliment for doing well.
Awesome.
She was very, very excited that was given to her and felt very proud, and it's like, it's this little tiny piece of clay, but it is making an impact.
Good.
Yeah, the other thing, just to take Craig's point a little further, obviously he was on with Ray Ozier one morning, and I forgot who you were with.
John,
right?
Yep.
And Ray had actually commented saying that the founder was so moved by the video that the first time they had seen the video that he was quite emotional about it, and actually cried, because he never said he never gets to see where what happens on the other side of the story. In the founding of the company, he was I don't know how much, he got into it a little bit. He's an artist by trade, and actually that's what he does for a living. And he had a close family friend whose son was terminally ill, and the Happiness Seeds were just something he said he created one day in his studio and just said, hey, I thought these would make you laugh. And they were so moved by, what he had brought to them that they came back and said, you have to do something with these. Like, these made a real difference in his life, once you gave them to him. So that he felt was like the purpose of the organization. They moved forward with that, but he was very moved by the video, which obviously was great.
Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, Kathy?
We have 5 warrants for the committee's approval this evening. The first warrant is in the amount of $5,919.29.
Do I have a motion? Motion from Mike, seconded by Jim. All in favor?
The second warrant is in the amount of $264,095.47.
Motion from John, seconded by Scott. All in favor?
The third warrant is in the amount of $24,563.18.
Motion from Joe, seconded by Jen. All in favor?
The next warrant is in the amount of $19,538.69.
Motion from Mike, seconded by Joe. All in favor?
And the last warrant is in the amount of $564.07.
Motion from John, seconded by Scott. All in favor?
The committee also has the latest monthly financial update, and you may have noticed that there is a little different look, and that is because the Department of Ed has included additional fund codes. They actually changed the chart of account structure. I can't remember, maybe 25 years was the previous. So this is new fund codes, and they're essentially wanting to track areas of instructional coaching as an expense, professional development, new areas, as well as long-term subs. So that data as a budget fund code has been added to our monthly financial for future expenses and budgeting. We also have a list of our latest appointments from our previous meeting as a personnel update. No vote is required. However, we do have a out-of-state field trip request from the Hotel and Hospitality Program for 38 students to attend a field trip. I forget the name of it's in New Hampshire. Is it the university? UNH. For UNH, approximately 38 kids will be attending grades 11 and 12, and that is during the school day on January 29th. It is out of state and does require a vote.
Okay, we have a motion. Motion from Jim, seconded by Scott. All in favor? And Kathy, those new fund codes, or not fund codes, but those new.
That's correct, fund codes.
It is fund codes?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
What's
What
fund
page-
with a D, not fun?
What
supposed to
page
be
was that
cruel.
on?
Well, you'll identify them as having a $0 beginning budget balance, and they're actually throughout the financial. But you can clearly identify the grouping because it's all zero.
Okay.
For instance, page 6, you can identify instructional staff professional development salary. That would be a new fund code for 2356.
Okay.
That's how it looks throughout. So if you want to view them for the structure as we begin our budget.
Okay. So you didn't have to shift anything around? You just
I-
had to add the new codes?
I will have to shift the long-term subs. So if we have a maternity that might be 12 weeks, I don't know that. I don't have the hindsight to know that. So we'll pay that from the teacher's expense line. And then after the expense, I'll transfer it to the long-term sub what the expense cost.
Okay.
I think that would be the best way to handle that because it's unknown. Some teachers come back sooner than later.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Just a quick question, actually, just with the personnel update. Kathy, what's a 7D driver?
That would be our minivans. So
Okay.
we have teachers that get the classification at the RMV so that they can do local trips with the students.
Okay, perfect. I saw that in our personnel update. I saw it was a new 7D driver from Milford High School. I just wasn't familiar with what that was. I figured I'd ask. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
Subcommittee updates. Scott, want to give an update on budget?
Sure. So we did have a budget subcommittee meeting Is that this week or last week?
This week. Monday.
Okay, starting to blur.
Yeah.
So I apologize. So we did have a budget subcommittee meeting. Really nothing of massive consequence, just as we start to prepare, making sure that we have the data prepared for our meeting. We got a quick update on where the budgets are in their defense process. We're really, the central office is in the process of completing their review of the defense of the budgets from the principals and the CTLs. Looking forward to looking to come forward with an initiative list for us for our January 6th Saturday session, as has been our tradition for certainly at least the last 6 years. I think it actually started about 6 years ago is when we started doing the Saturday sessions. So that's really the update at this point. We're just about on the cusp of budget season. We talked about things like making sure how do we prepare for budget? We know we're heading into teacher contract negotiations. How do we make sure we, provide provisions for that? Any potential impact on that? That was a big piece of the conversation as well. Jim, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
No, that's it.
Okay.
One thing that did come up, I know all of you've probably gotten questions around the bleachers at
Yes.
Stacy. So
Regularly.
those are going to be worked on. Fortunately, Kathy worked closely with Lenny in community use, and community use is going to fund the repairs of those bleachers. So
Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you.
That's great.
all right, thanks, Scott.
I didn't know there was a problem.
Oh, you did?
Every Saturday.
Have you been in the building?
Oh, I have.
Future
Some
agenda
people
items.
scale them to the top and sit up at the top of them.
Does anyone have any future agenda items?
Just if we
Scott?
can, just in with respect to the conversation that was from our invitation to speak, anytime there's a policy that's called into question or anything like that, I think it's an opportunity for us to just continue to just monitor and review. Just ask, obviously, if it's a subcommittee I'm part of, but having the policy subcommittee just review along with Jerry our bullying policy, just to make sure, good opportunity just to review it. It's something that we review periodically anyways, but that would just be a future agenda item, really, for the policy subcommittee.
Yeah, it may be a good opportunity to partner with the wellness committee too, because it's all tied together, right?
Mhm.
So as you start to move forward to put together that bullying forum, we can get feedback from those two.
Absolutely.
Committees.
Great.
All right. Any other future agenda items? Any old business? No old business? We don't have an executive session
No.
tonight, right? Okay, so no executive session. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion from Jim, seconded by Joe. All in favor? Good night, everybody.